The afternoon sun poured through the wide glass windows of the downtown cafe, painting streaks of gold across the marble floors. Businessmen in tailored suits murmured over laptops, waiters hurried past with steaming cups of espresso, and in the corner, Ethan Blake, the city's most reclusive millionaire CEO, sat alone. His dark suit was perfect, his watch worth more than most people's cars, but his eyes, tired and distant, betrayed a man who'd long stopped feeling alive. He'd built empires, acquired companies, and turned every failure into profit. Yet there wasn't a single soul who truly knew him, not since his wife had died 3 years ago. Not since his daughter, only 6 then, had followed her mother to the grave in a car crash he still blamed himself for. Ever since, birthdays, holidays, and even his own reflection had felt meaningless. He came to the cafe every Friday out of habit, not hope. But that day, fate arrived wearing pink sneakers. A small girl, maybe 7 or 8, stood by his table clutching a crumpled $50 bill in her hand. Her hair was tied in uneven braids, her dress was faded, and her shoes were clearly too big. Yet there was a strange determination in her bright brown eyes. "Excuse me, mister," she said, her voice trembling but polite. "Are you busy?" Ethan looked up from his coffee, startled. No, he said carefully. "Can I help you?" The girl bit her lip, took a deep breath, and held out the money. "Here's $50, she said softly. "I just need a dad for one day." For a long moment, Ethan could only stare. The words hit him harder than he expected, so innocent, yet so piercing. Around them, the cafe seemed to fall silent. A dad?" he repeated slowly. She nodded. "Yes, sir. My name's Lily. Today's my school's family day, and everyone has to bring their mom or dad. But my mom's sick and—" her voice cracked. "I don't have a dad." She looked down, twisting the money nervously in her hands. "I heard people can be hired for things, so I thought maybe I could rent one." Ethan's chest tightened painfully. He tried to speak but found his throat dry. Of all the meetings, contracts, and negotiations he'd ever faced, this tiny request from a child was the one thing he didn't know how to respond to. He leaned forward gently. "Lily," he said quietly, "you don't have to pay anyone to care about you." But she shook her head stubbornly. "Everyone says nothing's free." Something inside him broke. He had spent years buying everything. Comfort, respect, silence, but here was a child offering him everything he'd lost for 50 crumpled dollars. He reached out, slowly pushing her hand back toward her chest. "Keep your money," he whispered, "and if it's okay with your mom, I'd be honored to be your dad for a day." Her eyes widened, a smile slowly lighting her entire face. "Really?" she breathed, hope flickering like a fragile flame. "Really?" Ethan said, trying not to let his voice shake. "But only if you promise not to tell anyone I'm terrible at braiding hair." She giggled, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt something stir deep in his heart, something warm, alive, and terrifyingly human. When they walked out together, the sight turned heads. The billionaire CEO in his 3-piece suit holding the tiny hand of a little girl in worn-out shoes. No one knew who she was or why he smiled for the first time in forever. But as Lily chattered about her school and her sick mom, Ethan realized something astonishing. He didn't feel like he was pretending at all. The drive to Lily's school felt strangely unfamiliar to Ethan, though he'd passed that part of town countless times before. The car's leather interior, usually echoing with silence, was now filled with Lily's endless chatter. She talked about her teacher, Miss Carla, about how she once got a gold star for helping Timmy not cry, and about how her mom made the best pancakes in the world, even if they're sometimes burnt. Ethan listened, really listened, for the first time in years. Her words, full of innocence and light, seemed to melt the layers of ice that had formed around his heart. He found himself smiling without meaning to, laughing when she did, answering her questions with genuine warmth. When they arrived, she tugged on his sleeve. "You have to hold my hand, okay? So everyone knows you're my dad." Ethan nodded, his throat tightening. He held her small hand, and together they walked through the school gates. Inside, the gymnasium was decorated with colorful banners and paper hearts. Other children ran around, proudly introducing their parents. A few teachers glanced curiously at Ethan. After all, the tall man in an Armani suit stood out like a misplaced king in a kingdom of crayons. But when they saw how Lily beamed beside him, no one questioned it. During the activities, Lily introduced him to everyone. "This is my dad," she announced proudly to her friends. Ethan felt a pang of guilt every time she said it, but also something else, something he couldn't define. When she ran off to play a game, Miss Carla approached him with a warm smile. "You must be Lily's?" Ethan hesitated, unsure how to answer. "A friend of the family," he said finally. She nodded knowingly. "She talks about you like you're a superhero. Whoever you are, you've made her day." As the event ended, Lily clutched his hand again. "Thank you," she said softly. "Today was perfect," Ethan smiled. "You don't have to thank me, Lily." "Yes, I do," she insisted. "Because now I can tell Mommy that my dad came." The words hit him harder than he expected. He knelt down, meeting her eyes. "Can I meet your mom?" he asked gently. Lily nodded eagerly. "She'll be so happy. She always says good people are rare, but I think I found one." They drove to a small apartment complex on the city's quieter side. The building was old but tidy, flowers blooming in pots along the walkway. Lily led him up the stairs, humming. When she knocked, a woman's voice called from inside, tired but kind. "Coming, sweetheart." The door opened, and time stopped for Ethan Blake. Standing before him was Isabella Moore. His heart stuttered. He hadn't seen her in nearly a decade, not since the night she'd walked out of his life without a word. Back then, she'd been a brilliant junior architect at one of his firms, a woman who'd challenged his arrogance and touched his soul. He'd wanted to love her, but his ambition had consumed everything, including her. Now she stood before him, wearing a worn sweater, her hair tied back, and exhaustion written beneath her eyes. But she was still beautiful, achingly so, and Lily, her daughter, had her smile. "Ethan?" she whispered, disbelief flooding her face. "What are you doing here?" He didn't know what to say. For once, the man who commanded boardrooms and presidents was speechless. "I came with Lily," he managed. She asked me to be her dad for the day." Isabella's hand flew to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. "Oh my God!" She turned to Lily, who was smiling proudly. "See, Mommy? I told you he was nice. He helped me." Ethan's heart pounded. "Isabella, she's your daughter?" Isabella nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "She's mine." The silence between them was thick with the weight of everything unsaid, years of loss, regret, and the cruel humor of fate. Ethan finally found his voice. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Her eyes softened, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Because I didn't want anything from you, Ethan, not your money." "Not your pity, just peace." He felt the ground shift beneath him. Lily's eyes darted between them, confused. "Do you two know each other?" Isabella knelt and stroked her daughter's hair. "Yes, sweetheart. A long time ago." Ethan swallowed hard, looking at them both. The little girl who'd handed him $50 to borrow a dad was his daughter, his flesh and blood.